In today's episode, fill out a health and wellness survey within 24 hours of every shift after gutting most remaining benefits and reimbursal programs? Sure thing. Long and silly petty. When your ex tells you to move out while she's on a work trip because the guy she cheated on you with is moving in, you get very creative moving out. They kicked out my sister-in-law when she came out, so I forced them to sell the same house. So let's get started. Fill out a health and wellness survey within 24 hours of every shift after gutting most remaining benefits and reimbursal programs? Sure thing. Long and silly petty. After reading a story about the boss that calls the worker off the clock to berate them made me think of my petty little story with my company. Like many other companies, our leadership recently released news of upcoming changes that even though profits for our company are up, they are eliminating most of the remaining perks that are still standing. Company-supplied phones for anyone except the tops of the departments gone. Reimbursements for things like safety shoes, eyeglasses for those of us in the metals and fabrication areas gone. All 401k matches, merit increases, and/or bonuses frozen until figures reflect pre-pandemic levels, i.e. much larger profit margins, even though workload has increased. Our direct area has had a few manpower losses due to a few folks deciding to retire, and a few that decided to pursue WFH opportunities. Hiring freeze to replace anyone. All of this while the majority of the higher-ups and anyone who works with a computer and argued they can WFHR, working from home, which in our eyes is essentially a substantial raise/savings for those lucky individuals that can WFH, fuel, daycare, etc. With the cases on the rise again, they decided to implement a health and wellness screening that must be completed every shift within 24 hours to the start of that shift and presented at the security checkpoint. There is even a nice link to where you can complete it on your phone via an app for our convenience. Already annoyed at the above-mentioned cuts, and now they are wanting me to use my personal phone and data to complete a survey before working hours. I read the requirements again. It just had to be within 24 hours to the start of the shift and presented at the security checkpoint. We were working on average between 12 and 14-hour days, so I was easily able to complete and print a physical copy of the survey at the end of the day for the following day's requirement. That next day I showed up to security and gave them the paper. She just kind of looked at it and asked what it was. Told her it was the wellness screening, so I can enter the building for my shift. She replied, "Oh, well, it has to be done before your shift. This has yesterday's date on it." I pointed at the disclaimer that said it just had to be within 24 hours to the start of the shift, which it was. Which to her defense is kind of silly because a lot can happen between the day prior and the start of the new shift. Looking slightly annoyed, she said, "Oh, okay. You can just use your phone going forward so you don't have to print it out." Thanked her and said it was actually easier for me to just do it at the end of my shift, so I didn't have to think about it in the morning, especially since I didn't have access to the Wi-Fi until I was already past the security checkpoint. Third morning I did the same thing. She rolled her eyes and put the paper to the side. Didn't realize it at the time, but I was informed afterwards if we didn't use the app version it didn't have a digital record, so they had to save all physical papers in a folder and retain them in their office. The fourth morning the head of security was at the door, and as soon as I showed the paper he asked why I was choosing to do the physical paper instead of the app. Didn't want to get too in-depth, but told him it was easier for me to print it out at the end of the prior workday, and these guys do not pay my phone bill, so I was not going to use my personal phone and data to do a redundant survey off the clock every morning. He tried to argue the paper option was really only for the plants and not for the offices, and I was the only person printing them out in lieu of using the app. Told him I did not see where it said plant use only on the form, and if that was the case HR would need to update the verbiage. Couple of coworkers in the area caught part of the interaction, and how the guy was complaining to my boss as soon as he hit the door about 10 minutes later. I filled them in on what I was doing, and they decided to follow suit. All 15 of us completed the survey at the end of the day to bring in the following morning. Friday morning arrives, I am sitting in my car watching as a line forms and everyone has a paper in their hand. Can make out security guard's face, she looks pissed. Finally get out and go to walk in, big sh*t eating grin on my face, and say good morning. She doesn't say a word, just does the temperature check and snatches the paper out of my hand. Around first break, I see our HR rep walk into the shop and talk to my boss. He looks over at me and points in my direction. Oh boy, and she walks over and introduces herself. We'll call her HRQB because she looks like she can play for a minor league. HRQB, good morning. I am HRQB with Human Resources. We received a call from the head of security, and they are saying you're giving them printouts of the new health surveys. Do you need help with setting up the app? Petty me, oh no, that's not necessary. I actually already told him it is easier for me to do it at the end of my shift the day prior instead of doing it on my personal phone in the morning. I don't get very good reception here until I am on the Wi-Fi, and that's past security. HRQB, well, you don't need to be on the Wi-Fi here to complete the survey on the app. You can even do it at home before leaving for work and take a screenshot of the confirmation. That way you won't have to waste paper, and the security team member at the door won't have to keep it in a folder and drop it off to the office every day. It will save a lot of time and energy. Petty me, oh well, unfortunately the company has taken away all of the company-issued phones except for select individuals, and I am not going to do the survey on my personal phone or during non-work hours. I agree doing this survey every single day is a bit redundant and wasteful, but it isn't. My paper and proof is required for me to enter the building. While it is tedious, I am pretty sure that security is on their phone for 7 out of the 8 hours that they are stationed at the door. Think they can take 2 minutes to walk down the hall to drop off the papers at the office. Pretty sure I could have poked the vein on the side of her head and caused a stroke. I thanked her for her time, and my team lead came to pull me to help him with a job/save me. The first few days of the following week, most of my coworkers kept printing out the physical copies, which I thought was hilarious, but it was pretty short-lived. HRQB must have worked harder than she's ever worked in her life, because wouldn't you know it, come that following week an email came out with a link to a new survey that only had to be completed one time online, and if after that at any point you had flu-like symptoms, tested positive, or were near anyone that tested positive, they held you to the honor system to report it to supervision/HR. When your ex tells you to move out while she's on a work trip because the guy she cheated on you with is moving in, you get very creative moving out. I had originally posted this as a response to a question in our /unethical pro-life tips, and was told that this would be appreciated here. Enjoy. I did this to an ex who asked me to move out while she was on a work trip and told me she was coming back with her new boyfriend. We were still together when she left. I got these little noisemakers, battery-powered ones the size of a quarter that emit sounds at just the right volume that you aren't sure if you really heard it, so quiet that 2 people could be sitting in an average-sized room, and while one can barely hear it, the other wouldn't hear a thing. They last ages and fit perfectly in light fixtures and in wall outlets. I got a box of 20 of them for like $100 on eBay, and got so creative all over the house, her car. I even hid them in a boat her father got her, rich family, and she grew up sailing. Now these little bastards make a noise at complete random intervals, could be minutes, could be hours, could take a whole day off. They cycle noises like children laughing, a dying breath as they called it, a whistle, scratching noises, some other ones I can't remember, but you get the idea. It was so unpredictable it was near impossible for someone to just figure it out. Months go by, I get a new place, get my life back up. Now we had a few friends in common, and one of them I kept up with. They were kinda sour about how she ended things, but they had grown up together and kept up the friendship, loosely talking and catching up on occasion. I never really asked about her, but one day we get to talking, and he's wanting to prank some friends on a camping trip, so I tell him about the noisemakers. As I'm telling him about them, he slowly starts making this face, like he's gradually losing his sh*t. He's got this huge grin on his face and asks me, "You put these in, sh*t, didn't you?" And when I admit, he starts laughing hysterically. Turns out her new boyfriend had only lasted a few months, and had left telling her that he couldn't handle whatever was going on with them and their mental states. Turns out for a while they had both heard things, and sometimes only one would hear them, which gave the illusion that something really f***ed with them was going on in their heads at different times. They couldn't figure it out, and eventually he wanted out completely, and having run down all the crazy list of sh*t people who are hearing voices would think ended it believing he had been infected with some brain worm the government was putting in vaccines or something like that. It was amazing, I hadn't expected to hear anything about it. I rode that train for weeks. When it went away I got another hit of that high. She moved out, told her parents she didn't want the house, and to give it to her brother or sell it. Wouldn't tell them why. I always tell people who ask about her that I hold no grudge, and don't tell them the part where I totally f***ked with her so bad I overshot the got her backstage, and hit the blissful state of satisfied with my work. My wife knows this story by heart because it's her favorite one to tell. They kicked out my sister-in-law when she came out, so I forced them to sell the same house. My sister-in-law came out as a trans woman when she was 18. My wonderful in-laws kicked her out of the house then and there. They told her to leave the house and threw her out at 8 p.m. with no money, or even any documents, and her father took the car keys from her too. She had to walk 8 miles to get to our place. She was crying and we took her in. This is horrible behavior, but my husband and I would have just cut them off if it was all they did, but they doubled down. They refused to hand over any of the documents, and my brother-in-law had to go over and barge into their house to get them. They also cleaned up all the money in a joint account. She had saved up $8,000 working part-time all through high school. They took the money and also sold her car, which was in their name. They were trying to ruin her life as much as they could. My father-in-law is a small-time businessman, and his biggest account was supplying my employer. I had helped him get the contract, and it was very lucrative for him. My employer was a family business, and they treated long-term employees more like family than as employees. I was talking to my boss about what happened. He told me that if I could find someone within 5% range of the price my father-in-law offered, they would make the switch. My father-in-law offered us really great rates. He was very good at his job, but he had f***ed up the contract because even though we always bought from him, we weren't obligated to buy from him. We could switch suppliers anytime, but he got complacent and assumed we wouldn't switch suppliers. It took me 6 months of painful searching to find a supplier who could replace him and get us great rates. This was not a major part of my duties, and I had to put in way more hours than normal to find the damn supplier, but when I did find them, I waited for a month before informing my boss. See, my in-laws had been planning to do major renovation for a long time, and it involved tearing down a major portion of their house. I waited until the renovation work had truly started before informing my boss. We started to get supplies from the new supplier the next month itself. It crushed his business. It f***ed his unit economics, and he had to scramble to find new customers. They ended having to sell their house to save the business, and they didn't get a good rate for it because the house was well half torn down when they sold it. My in-laws did try to get money from my brother-in-law, but he told them to f***ck off. My father-in-law is a decent businessman, and he did crawl his way out of the hole they dug for themselves, but even 8 years later they still haven't bought a new house. I have heard they are still sour about what happened. I mean, I was just doing my job, and if they had just kicked her out, they would still have the house. Thanks for watching.